Happy weekend, friends. If you came here for politics, just for this particular video, you may be disappointed. This is not a subject that's going to interest everybody out there, and I understand that. So, disclaimer, you may not want to continue watching if you're here for politics today, because that's not what I'm talking about. So, this is the first slide I'm going to show you, and this is in this picture, you're going to see these on the left-hand side. These sort of they look like capital H symbols or a capital I in Tiahuanaco. And this site is dated as being 2,000 years old. Now, whether it's that old or older, it's hard to say because I often disagree with the dating of sites. But roughly, we've got this 2,000-year-old site with these capital H symbols. Now, you can see the Spanish knocked all of these symbols in the lower left-hand corner from Tiahuanaco. They knocked them over and they've been put back up. So we don't know if they would have been on their side, as in the capital I sort of looking shape, or if they would have been just like these H's. But if you look to the right, the picture on the right of this slide, you're also going to see this is from Göbeklitepe. And Göbeklitepe is a fascinating archaeological site in Turkey that really kind of stole my heart a couple years ago. And so I made this slide a couple years ago because I saw some things in it that are purely conjecture, hypothesis, and theory, and I cannot, prove one way or another to you if this is in fact the case because, well, it's my theory. So that's why I said you might not want to watch this video. Just saying. Okay, unless you're interested in this stuff. So go back to Göbeklitepe. This site is dated at being 12,000 years old. And the interesting thing about Göbeklitepe is you're going to see the same capital H and capital I call them that shape because I don't know what else to call them. You'll see them on the belt of the humanoid pillars from Göbeklitepe, and that's what you're looking at the lower right-hand corner is one of the humanoid pillars from Göbeklitepe, dating approximately 12,000 years old. And you can see the workmanship on the stone. I mean, these people were far more advanced than anybody gives them credit for. And it really throws the whole, what we're taught in science as how, humanity became, we turned into a civilization and how we farming and this, that, the other. Well, Göbeklitepe was hunter-gatherers. In fact, there are no signs of farming in the time period in which they were the most advanced. So when you look at Göbeklitepe, you're going to see, okay, 12,000 years ago, they were extremely advanced. Then as time goes on, they would bury the structures and rebuild them. And it was sort of like most likely a religious shrine, okay? And every time that they rebuilt, the workmanship, the quality of the workmanship went downhill. And then around 8,000 years ago, it kind of begins to fall apart. It's not looking so good anymore. Now, in their most advanced state, the people that built Göbeklitepe were hunter-gatherers. In fact, there was, though, a wild type of wheat that is indigenous to the area about 50 miles away from the site of Göbeklitepe. I think that's, it's interesting because it did end up becoming the strain of wheat that we use for our modern, bread, the wheat that we use. But so here you go. On the one side, you've got the Tiahuanaco. You see the uppercase H shape. And then on the other side, you have Göbeklitepe. And you see this same shape going on. And these two ancient sites are separated in time by approximately 10,000 years. But they have the same symbology, which to me says maybe humans have been very advanced before, and that we have carried on certain traditions and passed on certain understandings and knowledge that have been passed on through various religious books, mythology, all of it, okay? That's how I see it. And so just keep these in mind. You also see towards the center here, the H, the I shapes on the center pictures are also from Göbeklitepe. We're going to move on to the next slide. This is a slide that's showing you three different sites, okay? So Tiahuanaco is on the far left, and you can see the placement of the hand over the stomach on this humanoid pillar. Then you come to Göbeklitepe. Also, please note where the hands are resting on the humanoid pillar. Then in the last slide on the far right, you see Easter Island. Note also where the hands are resting. Now, this corresponds to a chakra, if you're looking at sort of like an Eastern metaphysical look at it, or it can go straight to something more scientific, like the second mind. So, looking at this next slide here, you're going to see a quote that I put up now. And when I don't write something myself, I make sure to always give the other person the credit. So you're going to see the website from King's Psychology Network down here. But you see the second mind is in the gut. And I'll just read this to you. The gut has a mind of its own. The enteric nervous system, just like the larger brain in the head, researchers say, this system sends and receives impulses, records experiences, and responds to emotion. Its nerve cells are bathed and influenced by the same neurotransmitters. The gut can upset the brain just as the brain can upset the gut. Now you see where this is? Now look at the hands resting on this, on the picture on the far right, on the Göbeklitepe pillar. Do you notice how the hands are also resting over what we would call the gut or the second mind? Now this suggests to me that ancient people did in fact understand the significance of the gut. Okay, so just to kind of prove the point here, or illustrate the point, that some of these wisdom teachings, or whatever you want to call them, run through all kinds of ancient texts and mythology, like I said before. So here's an example from the Bible about the gut. And I think this is fascinating because this shows that there was an understanding of the function of your gut or your second mind in the people who wrote the Bible. They understood that. So bowels in the Bible also fill. 1 Kings 3:6. Then spake the woman, whose the living child was, unto the king. For her bowels, or gut, yearned upon her son, and she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it, meaning don't kill it. But the other said, let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. And of course, the moral of that story, slightly a subtopic here, but really is that, the person who wants to destroy something and break it up rather than have it continue on in life is not a legitimate, parent, a legitimate period, in my opinion. So that's what I think. I mean, the person who wants to see America destroyed, divided up, this is the illegitimate. The globalist is illegitimate. McCain is illegitimate. Hillary Clinton is illegitimate. But there's my politics for right now for you guys. Going on to Song of Solomon 5:4. My beloved put his hands by the hole of the door, and my bowels were moved for him. Okay, both of these references seem to refer to the bowels as being the emotional center, being related to reproduction, creation, right? The feelings that may come from those things. And people may want to disregard this, but this is actually, if you believe in any sort of how could I put this? That our species survives because the traits that are heritable, that cause us to be the ones that survive, are the ones that are going to be most likely passed on. So people who are in touch with this, right, are more likely to pass their genes on. And in fact, it's been proven that they can have women smell white t-shirts that men wore without ever seeing the men, and then pick out which ones smell the best. And interestingly, women are consistently able to pick out the best genetic mate from smell. And this is also, and it's related to the gut as well, or the second mind, because on a gut level, you ever felt butterflies in your stomach, right? When you're young, teenager, dating, same thing. That's a heritable trait that's going to, enhance the survivability of your offspring, your genetics. But so going on there, and you see I left a little link down here. So if you want to take an East Indian look at the subject, I put the website down here. But sometimes religious symbols illustrate an awareness of the sciences much before our modern people get it. Meaning that, whether you're looking at philosophy, or you're looking at mythology, or you're looking at ancient religions, you're going to see that it's clear that in their symbology that often they understood things that we don't understand. Let's go on from there. Now we're looking at some temple entrances and also the humanoid pillar from Gobekli Tepe. So on the right hand of the screen you have this H. Upper right hand corner, does everybody see the H here? Okay, that is part of the structure of the entrance to this temple. So I'm just going to read off what I wrote. The H is representing a doorway at the bottom and a doorway or a window at the top. One for heaven, one for earth. So you see how the H on the bottom is connecting to the earth, and at the top it's connecting to the heavens, right? The central horizontal line between the two represents the veil or the gulf, place where both heaven and earth meet. A lot of religions have different beliefs about what that is, whether you think it's, a gulf that's fixed between these two places or what. There's talk about it in a lot of different religious texts, but also it places God above and man beneath. That's another way of looking at it, with a line between them most likely representing where these two meet or connect, as in when you're connecting with God, you're on earth, you're connecting with God in heaven, right? You have to touch that gulf or that veil that passes between the two realms. This is why the entrance to a religious temple would have this shape. As in the next slide, it also is present in the models of the entrance to the Temple of Jerusalem, right? Temple in Jerusalem. Also, the belts on the statues in Göbeklitepe have the capital H and the capital I symbols around the loins. The H is made up of 3 lines. The capital I is the inverse of the H, also has 3 lines. The number 3 has an association with patriarchy or ancestors, and the number 4 can be associated with can be associated with the matriarchal type rather than patriarchy ancestors, because as you'll see, often 3 is associated with male and 4 is associated with female. So we'll get into that more later on in the video, but this argument is strengthened by the placement of the H over the loins of the pillars, and as you can see in the upper left hand picture on this particular slide, that the H is over the loins of the human pillars. So this would be also like ancestors, and also remembering what you learned from your ancestors. And this may have been a universal symbol that could have represented more than one thing. Now, moving on from there, because I'm not done with this symbol yet, guys. There's more to it. But also you're going to notice that above, on the left-hand side, is from Göbeklitepe. Ironically, the most advanced architecture is at the deepest, oldest levels and dates back as far as 12,000 years ago. The workmanship gets shabbier for the next 4,000 years until approximately 8,000 years ago, at 6,000 BC, when they stopped building entirely at the Göbeklitepe site. They would build these circles, right, with these pillars, and they would periodically fill them over, and then they'd build a whole new set, right, over a long period of time. Now, in the center, I want you to see that this, the temple shape once again on another temple that shows this H shape that I was talking about. Okay, we're going to move on. This is a model of Solomon's temple. In this picture, I don't think that I even need to highlight the H shape at the entrance to the Holy of Holies here. I don't think I have to point it out to you, but if you look at the left-hand picture in this one, you'll see the H shape in the entrance of Solomon's temple, right? Now, the H shape can also be an integration of the female and male archetypal symbols. The top section representing the female uterus, the U shape, and the lower symbol of it, being the inverse, being like male, right? So it can also represent, a combination of the two. Similarly to the symbol of the yin and yang, right? Or also how yin yang has 2 symbols that are just kind of flip-flopped, like similar to the H, okay? Also, the H somewhat represents the Y chromosome, which of course both males and females carry that X chromosome. 3 X chromosomes male and 4 X chromosomes female. So interestingly, this is also a fascinating source of information here. The human eye typically has 3 cones. They enable us to detect and interpret color in our brains. Scientists have recently identified between 12% to 50% of females have a mutation whereby they have a 4th cone that allows them to see a myriad of colors, repeating the 3-4 pattern, males 3, females 4, of the X chromosome is seen in males and females. I'm leaving a little article for you. I did not quote from that article in this slide, but I'm leaving an article down there. You can see the link. It's actually pretty interesting. So moving on to our next slide, kind of building on what we've learned here. Now this is where it gets, to me, very trippy. And like I said, I'm not trying to push a specific or endorse a type of religion here. I'm just pointing out that this symbology can be seen in religion on many levels. So we have here on this next slide, if you look to the left-hand side, I wrote the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Aleph, right? I may be saying that wrong. Compare it to the temple entrance, or the H shape, as well as the X chromosome. So, do you see here, this is a late, 400 BC type of Aleph that I have in the picture in the lower left-hand corner. Do you see how it also kind of looks like that H symbol that you see on the humanoid pillars that are 12,000 years old in Göbeklitepe? You see the same H shape as the Aleph in the entrance to the temples, whether we're looking at Egyptian, Jewish, you're going to see this shape once again, the H shape. Now you see also that this Aleph symbol, which does represent the entrance to temples, and quite likely also patriarchy, matriarchy, ancestors, then you see that this Aleph looks just like a normal X chromosome, which is absolutely fascinating to me. It may be a coincidence, but regardless, it's fascinating. Then to the right, upper right-hand corner, if you take a look, you're going to see a human egg cell. Obviously, this is microscopic, so you can see it up close. Now take a good look at that human egg cell, because every single one of us came from one of these human egg cells. And those idiots who want to play with trying to, what is even the word I'm looking at? They're wanting to use human intervention to change and shape and direct the way that we evolve, or which of our traits get expressed. This is dangerous stuff, guys, and it's stupid, because we don't know enough, and we could possibly screw things up in an irreparable way. But the human egg is absolutely fascinating. Now look below the human egg that you came from, right? And you're going to see a picture of Sirius, the star. Now, when you look at a picture of a star and you look at the picture of the egg, do you see the fine lines on it and everything? They're both filled with life. And there's so much, it's just fascinating to me to see that the star and the human egg look so similar. And in Jewish teachings, I believe that every human is a world. Every life is a world. And so if you can help someone else's life, if you can help them, you're helping a world. And I think that there is some truth to that. And that's probably getting a little deeper than I plan on getting in this video. Now, on to so we've kind of laid a groundwork here that there was some kind of understanding that these people had. Now, this is a map. Now, I am not the absolute best at plotting things out on maps, so this is rough. This is pretty much how it looks, but I'm sure that somebody out there who has much better spatial awareness and is better at reading maps than I am could have placed these locations on the map better than I could have. But not the point. So what you're going to see here on this map is I listed them as 3 different sites. One is Mount Ararat. That's A. B is Göbeklitepe. And C is ancient Ur. Now, Mount Ararat, where Noah's Ark supposedly landed after the flood, there have actually been some really interesting and terrific studies done on the large ancient boat matching the description of Noah's Ark that was found in that area. Now, no one knows for sure if that was actually the Ark or just some other, seaworthy vessel. However, the locals have revered these ancient, massive stone anchors that are in the area of where the Ark was found, near Mount Ararat. Okay, the fascinating thing about these stone anchors is that they have these, 8 crosses etched into them on each one, and they can be found, all around that specific area near Mount Ararat. And what is believed is that represents bloodlines, actually. Noah, his 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, maybe mispronouncing them, and their wives, Noah's wife and the wife of each one of his sons, which would represent, you might say, 4 bloodlines. Although the bloodline of Noah and his wife would be the same as, in some ways it'd be kind of like the same as his sons. They would be offshoots of that, but variations. So you have these 4 bloodlines representing by 8 crosses, 8 people, and I think that's just fascinating because you can even look at some of the genetic studies that have been done on the Ashkenazi Jews, for instance, and they think that it goes back to something like 4 females and 3 males, and that their genes were actually bottlenecked at one point. And that's why certain traits are so prominent in Ashkenazi Jewish people. Of course, not everyone's going to agree with this. So let's move on here and look at what else we have. So on the next map I'm going to put up on the screen, I'm going to show you 4 different archaeological sites or ancient sites. Going from left to right, you see Easter Island, which is they think about 1,000 years old. Then you have Tiahuanaco, 2,000 years old. Then you have a Dogon temple. I don't know the for sure dating on that one. That's why I didn't put one there. And then up here on the far right, you have the Göbeklitepe at 12,000 years old. Now, do you see the H symbol in Tiahuanaco? You see the H symbol in the Dogon temple. You see the H symbol in Göbeklitepe. Now, if I go to the next map, and you take a quick look at this one, this is fascinating. It's believed that the Earth's polar caps have recently been cored to previously unknown depths, showing so far 35 cycles of ice caps melting entirely, dispersing, then reforming in the same spot over a long period of time. Now, I've wondered since I was really actually very little if the Earth hasn't tipped on its axis. The proposed spot for the other polar ice cap has been speculated to be at Hudson Bay. Now, on this map, I marked Hudson Bay with a red circle here at the top center, right? And if you tip the map to reflect the alternative ice cap, or if, let's say, the Earth tipped on its axis, magnetic poles shift, whatever, let's say that you tip the map. All of a sudden, you have Easter Island, Tiahuanaco, the Dogon Temple, and the Göbeklitepe site roughly lining up across the center. I think that's fascinating to me because it's quite possible that there was something going on with the placement of these particular locations that sort of show our advancement as a civilization, and that we did keep certain things in common throughout these periods of time. So, moving on to my next slide, this is, to me, extremely fascinating. So if we had these 35 meltings and refreezing of the polar caps, and those are just the ones we know of, there may be many more, this would cause numerous worldwide floods and destruction. Now, as civilization rose back up, these deluges would, in fact, periodically break civilization back down. It is possible that when it says that Noah's promised that the world won't be destroyed by a flood again, it could be interpreted really as just saying this mass global destruction of civilization won't happen again, at least not with water, anyway. Meaning that maybe somehow, it's even feasible that the people from Noah's time had some kind of ancient understanding of astronomy and the Earth that we don't have. And they may have understood that the Earth wouldn't make it to another mass flood, so to speak. So I think that most people are aware that the flood myth is worldwide. So we're talking about the flood, Noah's Ark, right? In East Indian culture, Manu is the name they have for Noah. And he builds a boat, he saves seeds, animals, and things needed to reestablish civilization after the flood, and he saves them on a boat. Now that is the East Indian mythology of Manu. Now, I think it's just a little too much to be coincidence to think that that has nothing to do with the Noah's Ark story, considering that these stories of the flood go through all kinds of civilizations, right? But in the case of the East Indian culture, Manu is seen as a master yogi, and he's depicted on Indian seals with wild animals surrounding him, but he's not attacked. You can see that right here on the third picture towards the right. You see this guy kind of squatting in a yoga position. That's a picture of Manu, and under it I wrote Indus seal with Manu in the picture, so you can actually see. Now, if you look at the Indus seal to the far left-hand corner, on the lower left-hand corner, you see this symbol that I put a little red circle around, right? Now look over here, take that Indus symbol. Now, second picture to the right is one of the Göbeklitepe pillars, with the humanoid pillar with the belt around its waist once again, or around its gut. And you see the symbol that I circled here in red looks very much like the symbol that was on the Indus seal. Now, if you go to the symbol on the far right of this slide, you'll see that Manu is also depicted here as the master yogi, and there's lots of fish in this particular seal. Now, the fish, they've recently been able to decode some of the ancient Indus language, and I'll get into that further in this video. But the symbol for star is essentially a fish with legs. So you see Manu surrounded by these fish or stars, right? So there may have been some astronomical significance to the timing of the flood, and when they thought that would happen again, all of those things. Now I'm going to take you to the next slide. This is interesting as well, and it does eventually all relate back to each other, at least, the way that I'm looking at it. So these are North American ancient the Indians from North America. This is a stencil of a human hand. This is before 400 AD. And they share the symbol that is on the humanoid statues at Göbeklitepe that are, 12,000 years old. They also have the same symbol that is on the Indus Valley, on the Indus Valley seals. Now, if you look at the symbols, you see the hand here on the far left, right? Those are the Pueblo Indians, or the Anasazi hands. Okay, the Anasazi. You see how they show these whorls on the hand? That symbol looks like the one on the belt, the next picture over to the right. Now you follow it over one more. This is actually interdigit ridges on hands, show up in different areas on your hand depending on your genetic makeup. Even the type of prints you have on your fingers can be a sign of your genetics, right? They can tell things about your genetics with your fingerprints. But also, there is this loop that happens between your fingers. It's actually on the ridges of it's like your palm print rather than your fingerprint. And it does actually, this loop is very common to show up between the third and the fourth digit on your hand, right? If you look between your middle finger and your index, you may have a little loop right there, and that is some, it's a genetic thing, but it was shown on these humanoid hands. So then you come over here and you see this symbol on the Indus seal, and you can see it on a hand over here. So I think that's just fascinating. Moving on to the next one. So this is a quote. I did not write this. In the late 1940s, Dogon priests greatly surprised the French anthropologist Rael, and I'm not going to pronounce these gentlemen's names right, so-and-so, by telling them secret Dogon myths about the star Sirius, 8.6 light years from the Earth. The priest said that Sirius had a companion star that was invisible to the human eye. They also stated the star moved around in 50-year elliptical orbits around Sirius, that it was small and incredibly heavy, and that it rotated on its axis. All of these happen to be true. And then I'll let you guys read the rest of this, but in Dogon beliefs are thousands of years old. The Dogon name for Sirius, B, and I'm still reading from this, I just skipped ahead, consists of the word for star, or tolo, and Po, the name of the smallest seed known to them. So the word for star and the word for seed were, okay, so you put those together. So just like an egg is a seed, or how the offspring of Abraham and Sarah, or Adam and Eve, they're referred to as the seed, right? Just like a star. So going on from there, I put the website up, so if you'd like to look up that information on the Dogon, it's right there for you. So here's part of my conclusion. If Manu, Noah, or any other person fitting the flood story, name translations vary according to region and language, plus language was confused after the Tower of Babel, if you believe that, actually had 3 or 4, counting Noah and his wife, founding couples or bloodlines that did migrate into separate parts of the world. They would have shared a common oral history and teachings, and they would have brought those teachings to the places they settled in. This is why the myth of Noah is also in East India. It's also, there's flood myths in the American Indians. It's all over. The Egyptian myths are startlingly similar to Christian ideas. Both Moses and Jesus were educated in Egypt before they started their ministry. I think that's fascinating. All this Manu or Noah stuff happened before there was such a thing as a lot of break or a Jewish people, and can explain characters like Melchizedek, the high priest, popping out of nowhere, and yet he is a priest to whom Abraham tithed, without and before the Old Testament law and prophets. So, if you want to read the rest of this, you can, but I'm just going to kind of skim through this particular page. As noted in Hebrews, the lesser is always blessed by the greater. Melchizedek blessed the patriarch Abraham. So Melchizedek was of a higher order than Abraham, who of course at the time was still Abram. He hadn't been having his name changed to Abraham yet. But then where did Melchizedek come from? We don't have his lineage. But maybe he was one of the many wisdom keepers in all the settled lands that were trained after the flood, and many things that would have to be put in place to preserve truths in science and knowledge and wisdom, including the Noahide laws. And maybe those did travel to a place close to Erat and went back periodically to where it all began. Maybe one re-establishing center could have been Gobekli Tepe, very close to Mount Ararat and ancient Ur, where Abraham hailed from, by the way. The Dogon oral traditions, and many think that they were Egyptian immigrants, say in the past they used to send envoys of 8. So the Dogons would send 8 envoys to Egypt for wisdom trainings, or somewhere for wisdom teachings. This is also like the 8 on the ark. Okay, so to reestablish humanity after the destruction of the floods. Now, some Buddhists also have a similar ancient myth. Now, the H symbol is four-sided, like the elements of the zodiac. And I know I may be stretching this a little bit, but they've tried to establish new bloodlines with 4 couples. That's my conjecture here. Originally, the 8 people, 4 couples, came from the ark. The Ashkenazi Jews have been genetically traced back to 4 female founders, as well, 4 couples, 8 people, and actually, when they've been doing genetic testing to look at it, it's possibly only 3 males and 4 females. So then we have the male 3, female 4 pattern, as with the X chromosomes, as with the cones in the eyes, and also possibly with the symbology on the belts, referring to possibly patriarchal lines and matriarchal lines of ancestors. And so remembering your ancestors and your tradition would have been very important to not breaking down into lawlessness. And in fact, the Noahide laws are very similar to sort of universal laws you'll find in many different religions. And I think that it's because certain traditions needed to be kept. And one of the things about the Noahide laws is that one of the laws is that you're supposed to have laws and enforce them and set them up. Now, that's because when humanity becomes lawless, we lose all of our civilization. We have to remember our laws. We have to have tradition. And I understand there's innovations and new things that come, but there's some things, they say that knowledge grows faster than wisdom. I think that's true. And to sort of offset or balance that, if you remember the wisdom, it can help you deal with the knowledge and help with that. And interestingly enough, if you read the book of Proverbs, it appears that that everybody has male and female aspects to them, but the male is associated with knowledge and instruction, and the female with wisdom and understanding. So if you think of the men generally coming up with innovations, or Nikola Tesla, Einstein, whoever you're thinking of here, these are the innovations. This is knowledge and instruction. And the holding on to the tradition would be the wisdom and understanding. So once again, like the yin-yang, the H symbol, it's a balance of traits. And I would even say that Jesus embodied the best of both worlds, so to speak. So over time, the language and culture may have slowly changed or developed more rapidly under different circumstances, but the basics were handed down in oral traditions. They would be the same. And the thing with oral traditions is that we often think that they're just, they're not remembering things right, you can't rely on them. But you have to remember that the best way to learn something often when you're a child, how did you learn the ABCs? You learned it through song, right? Well, when you combine oral teachings with music, which it would have been conveyed in music, this is as old as time, poetry and music. your mythology, your history goes in there. Well, do you remember it, right? I mean, I had I had a couple of friends when I was like 8 years old, and they taught me a song, Kipin Sanso Ang Daisem no Go Waso Sangdayo. I'm probably not saying it exactly right, but I still remember that line from the song because it's about a bunny. It's a little kid song, okay? But the point is you remember things when they're in song form. Now, when you combine that with the fact that religious practices would maybe have certain colors associated with different, you know, celebrations, ceremonies, you would have the song, then you would have the dance, you would have colors, and you'd have also incense. So now you've combined several of your senses. You have song for memorization, you also have the colors, you also have the smells, right? And you also have specific body movements. It's my opinion. Hold on one second. I'm drinking coffee here while I'm telling you this. It's my opinion that when you combine all those things, you actually have a pretty good mix for remembering things pretty accurately. So even if you have a written language, if you also have these other ways ceremonially of remembering your history, remembering your ancestry, even if you go through a dark age and all written language is lost, you will still hold on to some of that wisdom.